Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. I am here today with a man who needs no introduction, at least here at Astrology Hub. I'm with Rick Merlin Levine, and we are going to be doing a deep dive into the month ahead, the month of May 2025. And Rick, I wanted to start with a quick question because I was listening to our buddy, Steve Judd's May month ahead. And he indicated that May might be a little bit of an easier month than some of the months that we've already experienced in 2025. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I agree. I think that May could be a very key month, and I think that we'll bump into a few very important periods in May. But I think May has some integration in it, and I don't think that. I mean, we're in such a crazy time. There's going to be new stuff every day, every week, every month for a long time. But I really do think that May has a little more stability than March and April had. They were both off the charts in the craziness of those months.
Yes. I saw a few comments under Steve's video, and people were saying, okay, like take advantage of this period of time then. If we have this a little bit of a lull in the feeling of intensity, maybe it's take advantage of whatever the opportunities are there. But I know we're going to be going deeper into this, Rick, in just a sec. Before we do that, I want to make sure that everybody knows that Rick and Steve, Nick Campion, Alex Trenowith, and Penny Thornton are all going to be together in London this weekend for a amazing conference called Shifts Happen. And they weren't going to be doing virtual tickets, but they have just released virtual tickets. So if you were thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could go to that in-person event, but for whatever reason you couldn't travel to London, you now have the opportunity to join virtually, and you'll be getting the live stream of the event plus limited time access to the recording. So if you're in a time zone where it doesn't work for you to be there live, you'll get access to those recordings. And we're going to put the link down below in the show notes. Check that out. Now would be the time to jump in. You can do full day passes, you can do half days, you can do the full conference, lots of flexibility there. Rick, do you want to say anything about it before we go deeper into?
Well, just that we got so much, clamoring over, I live in the United States, I live in Australia, I really wish I could come. And so, Steve and I have been planning this event since when I was in England last summer,
Yeah.
and weren't planning to do the virtual at all. But he's done it in a way that, has a whole team coming in to do it right. And so anyone who is not attending physically will basically have the benefit of being, involved in fully. And so, yeah, it's really exciting that we're being able to offer this to people who can't make it. Of course, being there, we're going to have more fun, but
Of
but
course,
it'll be good. And the topics of the people, I do a lot of conferences. And the topics of this conference, of this symposium, is really exciting. There's some really interesting stuff that's going to be covered that is not the stuff of regular conferences. And because there's not a faculty of like 20 or 30 people, often who only get to give one talk each, we're getting a deeper dive, in particular from Steve and I. But I've known Alex Trenowith for years, and her material is always so good. And of course, Penny Thornton has been around almost as long as I have. And so it's exciting. It's going to be fun. And, my first trip to England, geez, almost 30 years ago, about 26 years ago, I stayed at Nick Campion's house for a week. And so I've known Nick a long time. And Nick, of course, is the authority on mundane or world astrologies, the author and the researcher behind world horoscopes. And he is the person who runs the master's program, in the academic system in Wales at the University of Lampeter in Wales. And he runs a master's program in archetypal astronomy, which is astrology. It's astrology in the British academic institutions. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Nick's talk. I've been to so many of Nick's talks over the years. It's they're always good. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Mm. Also, many of you supported Steve Judd's docuseries that is going to be released very soon, and he's going to be doing a first screening of it at the event too. So you can get front row seat for that as well. So, all right, Rick, thank you. And again, check the show notes for the link or the description of this video, and you'll find the links you need to join.
And by the way, before we leave this, Department of Crass Commercialism, I should say that through the month of May and into June, I'm going to be at conferences in Porto, Portugal, in Stockholm, Sweden, in Milan, in Copenhagen, Denmark. And people can go to one of my pages on YouTube, find it, and find more information about that. But I'm really excited about spending a month presenting in Europe where I don't normally get a chance to.
You know, I feel like all of us need an astrology conference and astrology events budget now because there's just so many amazing opportunities to be together in community. Just when I was in Texas last week, it was like, oh my God, to be with people in person, there's absolutely nothing like it. And so, I know there's a lot of opportunities to do these.
And the Austin astrology community, I've taught there a few times. It's such a cool community.
Yes, I couldn't believe it. We sold out that event in Texas. It was amazing. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about May, Rick. Why are you agreeing with Steve that it is less of a intense month than the ones that we've been navigating so far?
Hi, I'm Georgia Stathis, and I'd love to personally invite you to join me for the Essential Aspects course presented by Astrology Hub in May 2025. In this 3-week journey, you're going to gain a deeper, more dynamic understanding of planetary aspects, which is one of the most essential keys to interpreting a chart with confidence. You'll have the chance also to ask questions and get support each week because they're going to be live Q&As every week. So to learn more and reserve your spot, visit www.astrologyhub.com/aspects. I can't wait to see you there. Happy spring.
Well, I'm agreeing with Steve because it's politically in my interest. I'm kidding.
Of course.
We've just had some real rock and roll energy, with the inner planets retrograding and going through as they began to move forward, Mars and Venus and Mercury. They were all replaying events that went back to as far back as the presidential election in the United States. And by the end of April, Mars had pretty much passed through the area, where it had its difficult aspects, including its opposition to Pluto. Now, Pluto is going to be a key player through the month of May because Pluto is the first of the planets after this period of time where everything's been moving direct. Pluto on May 4th turns stationary retrograde. But look, when Pluto turns direct or retrograde, it's moving so slowly that we're barely going to notice it. I made a note before this because I was curious. On May 1st, Pluto is at 3 degrees of Aquarius and 49 minutes. So that's like 3¾ degrees of Aquarius. On June 1st, Pluto is at 3 degrees and 39 minutes. It moves 1/6 of a degree through the entire month. So even though Pluto is turning retrograde on the 4th, it's literally stationary all month. I mean, the amount it moves backwards doesn't really amount to anything. And the reason why that's significant is that when planets move slower, they have more inertia. They have more oomph. It's like when Mercury turns retrograde or direct on the days that it does. That's often when things happen. And so we look to aspects to Pluto through the month, and those are going to be important. Like when Venus makes a sextile to Pluto on May 6th, it's going to deepen our sense of what's of what we value. It's going to be louder than it normally is. Or when Mercury makes a square to Pluto on May 12th, which is also tied up with the full moon. We'll go there in a few minutes. All these aspects to Pluto throughout the month, when the sun makes a trine to Pluto on May 24th, they're going to be stronger Pluto aspects than they normally are because Pluto's holding extra weight because it's not moving. But I think ultimately we have all of the inner planets that are moving out of their shadows. The shadow is the area when a planet goes direct and then retrograde and direct over that same area in the sky. It's like the planet covers, from Earth's point of view, it's like a planet conjuncting my nose, direct, and then retrograde, and then direct. There's an area from here to here where the planet is going back and forth. And all of the planets are now moving out of their shadows. Mercury actually moved out of its shadow on April 26th. Even though it had been going direct for a while, for the first time, it was moving into new territory where it never went to before on this cycle. Venus moves out of its shadow on May 15th. And in fact, we open the month of May with Venus having just moved into Aries at the very end of April, and Venus making a conjunction with Neptune on May 2nd. And that is interesting because it's the third of three conjunctions that Venus made with Neptune. The first was back at the beginning of February. The second was on March 27th. That was during the retrograde phase. And now direct, it's making its third and final conjunction with Neptune. And then it's moving by the middle of the month into areas where it hasn't been yet. And so this conjunction with Neptune in some ways, I think, is reminding us that Neptune is still so important because it's just moved into Aries. Okay, it's been a month now, but it moves so slowly that Neptune now in Aries is still getting what's the word I want to use? Transits from planets that are giving us a flavor and a taste of how it's going to be in Aries rather than Neptune joining up or conjoining with Neptune, Venus conjoining with Neptune 2 times already, but that was in Pisces. And so now in Aries, we're getting a different flavor of these fantasies, these illusions, these dreams, these visions of what's going to be around the corner. And here we go to another thing that I think is very important through the month of May. And I'm guessing this is something, sometimes I look at things a little differently than other astrologers do. And I'm guessing that other astrologers have not spoken about this yet. And here's the other thing that's really important about May. Saturn, which has been tracking Neptune, getting closer and closer to Neptune. Now, it doesn't reach its exact conjunction with Neptune until next February. But through this summer, it comes so close to it before it retrogrades, and then they both retrograde back from Aries into Pisces. And so what's happening through May is that Saturn is gaining on Neptune. And in fact, Saturn moves from Pisces into Aries. Remember, Neptune moved from Pisces into Aries just a month ago. And now as Saturn moves from Pisces into Aries, it gets within a degree of Neptune. Now, why does this matter? Well, because as planets are making aspects to Saturn, the planet of hard work and constriction and authoritarianism and the ability of holding things in the status quo, that Saturn kind of cementing things and contracting and crystallizing things, planets, as they're making aspects to Saturn, are then going to make that same aspect to Neptune. So that what's going to happen through the month of May, I've noted this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different aspects are being made where a planet's going to make an aspect to Saturn, causing some structure, some reality. The first one is the sun making a half square to Saturn on May 2nd, the same day that Venus is conjoining Neptune. So it's like dream and vision and whoop, make it real. But the sun then makes the half square to Neptune just a few days later, 4 days later. And so we're getting this constriction. Oh, possibility. We're getting this reality check. Wait a minute, what's real? And so we're getting this again and again and again through the month until by the time Saturn actually moves into Aries, we're getting these almost at the same time. I mean, the sun makes a sextile to Saturn, sun sextile, and that's on May 20th. The sun sextiling Saturn it's an ease of expression if we take the opportunity to make something real. It's a reality check that works. And that's a really important aspect. And that's on May 20th. But by the 22nd, the sun is making that sextile to Neptune. And so we pull in and make it real. And then so, whoa, or maybe there's a rule imposed upon us. And then all of a sudden we realize, well, no, that rule wasn't what we thought it was. There's room to turn it into a vision. And so I think this energy is going to be with us throughout the entire month. And I think that Saturn's movement from Pisces into Aries on the 24th, and Saturn will be in Aries for a while in September. I think on September 1st, it backs into Pisces again. But we're getting another wash and a wave by the end of May of what's coming around the bend and around the corner. And so I think that when Steve says that May isn't quite, it's not as crazy. I mean, there's still a lot of energy that's unfolding. And when we talk about the full moon and new moons, we'll see that it's not all smooth and flowing, but the outer planet energy is a bit more stabilized. And there's one other thing that I think plays with us all month, and that is that Chiron, at the beginning of the month, Chiron is approaching. It's within 1 degree of orb of catching up with Eris. Now, I know many astrologers more and more are using Eris, just like if you were an astrologer in 1977 when Chiron was discovered, you may not jump in and use it, but now everyone does. Or if you were an astrologer in the early 1930s, you might have thought Pluto, it doesn't matter. But obviously these new planets do matter. And Eris, as many people watching probably know, that Eris was Mars's sister. And like every new planet that gets discovered, when it's discovered, it gets a bad rap. Pluto was the planet of mass fascism and dictators and death. And now we know it's also the planet of metamorphosis and transformation. When Uranus was discovered in the 1700s, it was considered to be the worst thing ever. It was cataclysm. It was awful. And now we know, well, it's also not only breakdown, but it's brilliant breakthrough and invention. So Eris, even Chiron, which was the wounded healer, now everyone is talking about, well, yeah, but Chiron was also the first teacher. It was the mentor. Chiron taught, Hercules how to fight and taught Asclepius how to heal. So every planet goes through that kind of metamorphosis. No exception with Eris. Eris has been called the planet of disorder, sowing disorder and chaos. And so Eris got a bad rap. I mean, Mars's sister, Eris, threw the golden apple into the wedding. And this is Helen of Troy. This is the wedding that kicked off the battle. And when she threw the golden apple into the crowd, it created just mass disruption. But here's the thing, what Eris does is Eris sticks around because she wants to know where the disruption is so it can be integrated on a higher order. In other words, it's almost like chaos is created so we can see where the problem is. And so what happens during the month of May is that Chiron, toward the end of Aries, right now, on May 1st, Chiron is at 24 degrees of Aries, and Eris is at 25 degrees of Aries. They're just slightly over a degree apart. And they actually reach their exact conjunction by May 26th. This is a long process. It will play out through, not only through, in May, and even by July, they'll still only be 1 degree apart because they move so slowly. But this is a process that will play out through 2025 and into 2026. And so it's Chiron who is the wounded healer, but also teaches those people who might suffer from the same wounds how to avoid the critical problem that Chiron had in its experiencing those conditions. And so when Chiron and Eris line up, as they do every, I don't know, maybe 53, 54 years, this is an opportunity for us to be confronted by all those things that are problematic, the disruption, the disorder, the chaos, not so that we get sick or so that we're overwhelmed by the chaos, but so we can heal it. And so there's this potential through the month of May, I think, of moving into a space where rather than just feeling the wound, that we actually use that as a reminder of what it is that we need to heal. And now the problem is that there will be those people who will just take that wound and want to project it and may even use it to hurt others with that same wound, because there is this whole element in astrology often of projection. But I think we have a real opportunity here to do something very powerful and very healing with this energy.
Okay. Lots of questions for you, Rick. You've mentioned several times throughout our recent forecasts that in 2025, there's a bend or a curve in the road that none of us can really see beyond, that there's such, things are changing at such a large scale that it's almost impossible to know what the next phase is going to look like. In this forecast, you mentioned a few things that might be giving us some insight into what's beyond the bend. And essentially, you were talking about that with Saturn moving into Aries. So
Yes.
are you feeling like it's a little bit of a precursor, that some of the energies we're experiencing can give us clues into, and that both personally and collectively, that we could be getting some clues into how the world will be beyond February of 2026?
Yes, I think that is the case, and I think that will continue to unfold through the summer. And again, I don't think all of this is going to be easy, because it's not out there, it's in here that's going to save us. And I think that what's happening is that people are beginning to realize that I don't want to say it doesn't matter who wins an election, but I do want to say that what we're going through, we'd be going through no matter who won an election. And that the ultimate thing that is unfolding is that we're realizing that the saving grace is not going to come from the outside. It's going to come from the fact that we're going to realize that we're all in this together, and that whoever it is that we may think is saving us from the outside is not going to. And therefore, we need to make new alliances and new partnerships, perhaps with people who we totally have dissed in the past, people who we've excluded, whether it's a gender exclusion, a racial exclusion, a political exclusion, an economic exclusion, that we have to basically realize that we need to make community so that we can stand up to what it is that is the real problem. The real problem is not to be just totally localized from a US perspective. The real problem is not the Democrats. The real problem is not the Republicans. By the same token, the solution is not going to come from either of those two places. And that's the gradual disorder that we're seeing, that we would be seeing anyhow. And this, I think, is the deeper process of what we're at the beginning of. Now, what we'll do with this, I don't know. We've never been here before. We've never had this many people on the planet who can communicate with one another instantaneously. There's no way to predict what's around the bend. the technology, and I don't just mean, the internet, social media, although that's certainly a big part of it, but AI and ASI, artificial super intelligence. There have been things over the last month with quantum computing that I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, where they've turned on computers with these new quantum computer chips, where the computer has basically said, "Oh my God, I've discovered the beginning of the universe, and I understand it all." And the programmers were so freaked out, they turned the machine off so they could deal with what are they going to do with this data that this thing has just figured out. And I'm not making this up. The computer turned itself back on. This is like an open the bay doors, Hal. No, Dave, I cannot do that. This is like we're walking into new territory. And so the thing is, we are at a very profound, not only a bend in the road, it's not an intersection. We're being forced around like a sharp turn. And anyone who says they know what's going to happen over the next year doesn't. But we do know that by the time, and I'm not the only one who said this, that astrologers kind of agree that as Pluto has moved into air, Aquarius, as Neptune has moved into fire, Aries, as Saturn, in May is moving into fire, Aries, as Jupiter actually moves out of Gemini and into Cancer in July, and then as Uranus moves out of, Taurus into Gemini, everything is changing. And it's changing in a way where what we do now or what we don't do now is going to set in stone as the alloy molten cures. It's going to be a whole lot more difficult to change by the time we get to 26 or 27, 2026 or 2027. So this is a very potent, important period of time, but I don't think it's quite as disruptive as the last couple of months have felt. It may be disruptive, but it's almost like we're in it now for the longer haul.
Rick, thank you so much for the reminder that no matter who's quote unquote in power, no matter what is happening in the world, this period of time is going to happen anyways.
Amanda, I've come up with like a new way to explain this to people
Yes.
because I get heat when I talk. I mean, no matter what position you take out there
Yeah.
are people who are going to be offended by what you say.
Right.
But there's this story that's been told, and it may not be as true, but it's such a great, as we would like to think, but it's such a great metaphor. And that is that if you put a frog into boiling water, the frog freaks out and does whatever it can to escape its death. Whereas if you put a frog in lukewarm water and gradually turn the heat up, the frog lethargically boils to death. What we're seeing is, in the United States, there's two approaches of how we deal with things. The blue or Democrat solution is slowly boiling to death, whereas the red solution is boiling water here and now. Neither solution in the long term is going to save us. The question is, do we suffer massive collateral damage in the moment and freak out because everything is so upsetting and confusing? And don't get me wrong, it is. Or do we go back to a lethargic state where we say we can just keep going the way we were going, thinking everything will be fixed? It won't. And that's the wake-up call that we're getting. That's what I see.
It reminds me, I mean, astrologers have been talking about the age of Pisces and the age of kind of the externalized authority, the guru, the government takes care of you. The priest takes care of you. It's all out here and they're there to take care of us versus the age of Aquarius, where it is truly about the human and actually about us as individuals contributing to the collective. And so this breakdown, even just mentally for us of, oh, wait, it's not going to come from out there. Oh, wait, it does have to come from us. And not only does it have to come from us as individuals, but it has to come from us as a collective. Oh, wait, that means we need to figure out how to get along. Like all these things. And what you're describing, the chaos we're seeing externalized is also an internal chaos of having to reorganize around these new realizations and these new reality checks, as you were saying before.
Make no mistake about it, this change is so big that, the age of Aquarius is most likely a good 100 years away, regardless of what people say it began in 1962 or on March 13th, 2024 or whatever. I mean, if you're counting the ages, of 2,170 years or whatever the number is exactly, and you realize we began counting, give or take 5 or 10 years around the year zero, the age of Aquarius won't begin until around 2140 or 50 or somewhere in there. And people are saying, no, but see, with cusps, with a sign, a cusp only lasts a few hours or a day or so. But with a cycle that's 26,000 years long, 100 years in we are in that cuspal period of time. Yeah. But this change is so big, and you look back at what life was like 100 years ago compared to what it's like today, and understand that change has accelerated continuously. And now look at what life is going to be like 100 years into the future. Sorry. You ain't got it. You can't convince me. You go to science fiction and anyone's fantasy is a potential.
What do you feel are the essential ingredients for us as individuals navigating such an accelerated moment of change, an accelerated moment of unknown? These are conditions that are generally challenging for humans. So in terms of the astrology, where is it pointing us to find as graceful as possible as a way through this moment in time?
Process your own trash. Don't think the trash man is going to come and pick it up. It's I think of the Dalai Lama when asked once, so what is your religion? And he said, my religion is kindness. Ultimately, it's how are we going to get along? We live on a little island. I mean, it used to be a vast, we didn't even know what existed out there. For hundreds of years, people were afraid to lose sight of land because they thought they would fall off the edge. We now know that the bigger picture of things is for anyone who's read The Three-Body Problem, we're bugs living on a dust mote. And we're important bugs because we are all we got, so to speak. But the point is that we are either going to figure out how to survive on this little island that we call Earth, this island Earth, or we're not. And the way we're going to survive is by listening to those people that we hate, those people that we project our fears onto, those people who say things that just rub as like chalk on the board. It doesn't mean we need to agree with them, but we need to begin to understand why they are saying what they're saying. But it's a two-way street because they need to begin to understand why we or you or I am saying what I'm saying. And this is not going to be an easy process because typically one side will say, all right, I'll listen to you. And then the other side will say, that's great. Now you have to think like I do. I'm not going to listen to you. And there is no side on any one of these issues that is more in the clear than the other side, because we have this idea that our perspective, our values, our view of the world is what's correct. And we need to begin to understand. And part of this is, I think, Neptune going into Aries, that it's not what the external world is not anything that we imagine it to be, that there is an external world and it is our projection, but somehow we have to make that projection work. In other words, Saturn. We're talking Saturn and Neptune, okay? And that's a lot of what May is about. Saturn and Neptune getting closer and closer together as Saturn gets closer and closer to making its transition from Pisces. And Saturn was never at home in Pisces because Saturn wants reality and structure. And in Pisces, there is none. And so as Saturn goes into Aries, it's going to want to push to the edge of where that structure is. And I think that what happens is that Neptune is the dream that anything is possible. I mean, Neptune, when it was discovered, was considered to be delusion, mental institutions, psychosis. That's what Neptune was. And it wasn't until we began to integrate the imagery of the planet that we began to realize, well, wait a minute, this is also spiritual visions. This is also creativity. This is the magic of making a dream. And to quote Walt Disney, a dream is a wish your heart makes. And we actually, using Saturn, we make those dreams come true. Now, often what happens when Saturn and Neptune align is we're just aware that our vision is not what's true, and we become disillusioned because Neptune is an illusion. But an illusion isn't something that's not true. It's just something that's imagined, and we then either get to make it true or we become disillusioned. And we all have a lot of disillusionment right now, no matter who we are on the planet. And the trick, and I feel like in some way like a record that skips over the same thing again and again, the practice is to be aware of where we are disillusioned without becoming discouraged, because courage comes from the French cœur, from the heart. And we have to say, this isn't the way I imagined it. Now I have to go to my heart, and how can I make my dream come true? So I think that the work has to do with dancing on this cusp between yin and yang signs, between between the feminine and masculine signs, or the negative and positive polarity signs, or between Pisces and Aries, or between Saturn and Neptune, because Neptune basically, here's the possibility, here's the dream, and Saturn says, make it real. But you got to do the work to make it real, because if you don't, you just end up disillusioned.
So interesting, Rick. So playing around with AI and seeing how easy it is to dream with AI, meaning you can throw out any idea, and ChatGPT or whatever you're using will say, well, would you like to put that into a plan? Would you like to, actually see how that could roll out? And it's like, well, yeah, sure. So then, ChatGPT is giving you the plan. But then when I'm looking at it, I'm going, whoa, but to actually make that real, what's it going to take? I mean, it's going to take a lot more than a really nicely laid out plan on a piece of paper, right? We all know that. Anybody that's bringing things into form, it takes a lot. So I love this kind of contract and expand that you're talking about with Saturn and Neptune all throughout the month, and your reminder not to get discouraged. That even though it's always harder in this third dimension to bring things into form than we think it should be, than we ever want it to be.
That's what Saturn is. Saturn is the three-dimensional reality. Caroline Casey used to say, she still probably says it, that imagination lays the tracks for the reality train to follow. And I like to say that Neptune, which is imagination, creates the framework or scaffolding for Saturn to construct reality on. But when we have that scaffolding or framework and we don't do the Saturnian hard work, then we're mentally ill. Then we are living in a fantasy realm that doesn't exist.
Oh, and okay. But it's up to us to bring it into existence.
One by one.
One by one. And I really
think cosmically, act locally. Take out your own trash, process it, because no one's going to pick it up. And of course, a lot of the problems that we have socially have to do with our unresolved personal issues that we project out. We start wars, we're aggressive, based upon fears, based upon old hurts, based upon cultural or individual wounds. And this is what we need to process individually in order for the change to happen culturally or globally.
Okay, so Rick,
Cosmically, act locally.
Yes, yes. You've given us a lot. So we're basically tracking Pluto's movements. Pluto, because it's not moving very much, is even more pronounced. The lack of movement is actually making it more important for us to pay attention to.
And it's not going forward anymore, meaning that for the last few months, Pluto has now moved into Aquarius and has moved forward a couple degrees, and it seemed like we're going somewhere. Now, on a very deep level, we're kind of entertaining the beginning of a retrograde phase where we're going to need to incorporate and assimilate what's going on before the next move forward.
Love it. Okay. The inner planets are all leaving their shadow areas. So we're
One left.
Yeah, one left, Venus, right?
Yeah, and Mars has moved into Leo now, and we have Mercury kind of blasting ahead, Taurus, and by May 25th it's into Gemini. In fact, May 24th and 5th we have Saturn moving into Aries and Mercury moving into Gemini, while Mercury is making that sextile to Saturn and Neptune, and now it's doing it like within a half a day apart. Remember, at the beginning of the month, the aspect from the sun's half square to Saturn and half square to Neptune is 4 days apart. But as they get closer and closer together, by the time we reach the 24th, 25th, 26th, we have Saturn moving into Aries, Mercury moving into Gemini, and Mercury making a sextile to Uranus and a sextile to Neptune within a day. Same day.
So new territory there. That means personal new territory. That means collective new territory. We're moving into new energies. We have this Saturn tracking Neptune. So the expansion, contraction happening all month. Just pay attention to that in your life.
And think also this whole expansion contraction thing. I like to think of it as Neptune is expansion that doesn't need to answer to Saturn because it's outside of Saturn. That's why it's imagination. You can go anywhere. But Jupiter is also expansion, and Jupiter and Saturn are in the middle of or toward the tail end of 3 squares. And so that Jupiter-Saturn square, the third and final Jupiter-Saturn square is I think it's in June. It's June 15th. And so all month we're coming closer to this very real, I can only grow this much and then have to pull it in. And so it's just another resounding message of this expand contract.
And then we have all month Chiron approaching Eris. So again, This is giving us an opportunity to take the chaos and the quote unquote disorder and reintegrate it into a higher order. And you said that we can heal it. So basically these wounds and all these things that are alive and open we have an even bigger opportunity to actually heal some of these things, to actually address them, to actually move beyond them. Go ahead.
And we have Jupiter making a sextile with Chiron and Eris on the 18th and 19th of the month. And that is the potential or an opportunity for healing something. But by the end of the month, because the Chiron-Eris conjunction is exact on May 26th. And incidentally, that's the same day as a new moon. We can talk briefly about the full moon and new moon of the month in a moment. But the Chiron-Eris conjunction on May 26th, by the end of the month, Mercury and the Sun are going to align. They do that on May 29th. And they're going to do that while they're both making a half square to the Chiron-Eris conjunction, which again can be disruptive communication, but it can also be a bit of a process breakthrough if we don't fall into the trap of just projecting our hate, projecting our fear, projecting our uncertainty onto someone else, blaming. There's no room for blaming what's out there anymore. That's really the bottom line. I'm not saying we will do this successfully, but that's really where we are.
Well, I love that too, Rick, because there's both the way we do that on the world stage, the world screen, projecting and blaming
And
politically.
personal relationships.
And then in personal relationships, yeah, one-on-one relate. Oh, it's your fault. You're the reason why I can't move ahead in my life. You're the reason why, it's that blame. So what I'm hearing is that anytime we find ourselves in that, because we all do at moments, to consider what is really here for me. Where's my end of this, and what do I need to continue working on? And Chiron and Eris and with Jupiter are going to be amplifying that and giving us an opportunity to see it in new light. And not just see it to see it, but also to actually, like you said, take out our own trash. So let's briefly talk about the new and the full moon.
Right. And this month is actually the full moon and the new moon, because the full moon occurs on May 12th, and that's a Scorpio full moon. And it is obviously opposite the sun, but the sun and the moon are moving toward a conjunction and an opposition to Uranus. So we have a very important aspect this month, and that is the sun's conjunction to Uranus on May 17th. And the sun joins up with the outer planets once every year, and the sun lining up with Uranus is an opportunity to basically break through the Saturnian restraints, and it can be break down, but it also can be break through. And this full moon occurs with the sun on the 12th, basically 4 or 5 days away. Let's see, the full moon is Pacific time, 9:56 a.m. on Monday, May 12th. And then the sun's conjunction with Uranus is 5 days later, but in the afternoon on May 17th. And so this full moon is holding the potential of that breakthrough. But there's something else incredibly important, and that is Mercury, which moves into Taurus. Mercury, remember, Mercury is now moving direct. It's out of its shadow. And Mercury moves into Taurus on May 10th. Pluto, stationary, is at 3 degrees of Aquarius, which means that when Mercury moves into Taurus, by the day of the full moon, actually within a few hours of the full moon, it's actually even less than that, within a half an hour of the full moon, Mercury makes an exact square with Pluto. Now, this is not an easy full moon because of that. We have the potential of the sun's conjunction with Uranus, the moon's opposition with Uranus, where things can be explosive. And I don't mean physically explosive, intellectually explosive. There's instability. And with Mercury making that square to Pluto, things can come out into the light that have been hidden and repressed. And of course, with Pluto so stationary during this period of time, even though it's technically already turned retrograde, that Mercury square to Pluto at the time of the full moon, I think, is an incredibly powerful full moon. And we need to be prepared to have communications over things that maybe we weren't necessarily planning on. Things are going to come out into the open. And again, this can be personal as well as collective or social. And when I say
May
social,
12th,
I
you
don't
said?
mean partying. I'm sorry, go ahead.
May 12th?
The full moon is on May 12th, and that's the same day, within a half an hour, as the Mercury square Pluto.
All right. And then how about the new moon?
Well, the new moon is a bit different. First of all, the new moon is a new moon in Gemini, and we have Jupiter toward the end of Gemini, Mercury having just moved into Gemini. Mercury moves into Gemini on the 25th. The new moon is on the 26th. So we have this flavor of the moon moving into Gemini, lining up with Mercury. Mercury's at home. It's really strong in Gemini. And the relationship between Gemini and Aquarius is a trine. Why is this significant? Well, Mercury is moving toward its trine with Pluto, and that's exact early in the, well, that's exact in the morning on the 27th. And so we have Mercury moving toward a trine with Pluto. We have the moon moving over its trine to Pluto just a few hours before the new moon. And we have the sun making its trine to Pluto on the 24th, just a couple of days before the new moon. Why is all this significant? Because all of these energies are about deep communication. Again, remember on the full moon, Mercury was square Pluto. That was disruptive. Now we're getting this flow of energy. And also, as these planets are moving from Taurus into Gemini, Mercury, as I just said, on May 25th, we also have the sun moving into Gemini on the 20th, the moon moving into Gemini just a half a day, 12 hours prior to the new moon itself. And as each of these planets move into Gemini, they're going to make a sextile to Saturn and a sextile to Neptune that are now only a degree and a half or so apart. And so we're going to get at this moon, that this new moon, this kind of whammy of hold it together, open it up, make it real, go to the potential, go to the dream, and yet it's lined with Pluto. And I think that this new moon is going to be a real opening of the curtain. I have the image of the ending scene of The Wizard of Oz behind the curtains, and I think that we may actually get a glimpse, of what's behind the curtain here, because there is a flow of communication. I love this new moon. I think the potential here is really quite great, whereas I think the full moon has some real difficult energy tied to it.
Rick, thank you. This has been so amazing to go through the entire month. I don't know about all of you, but I feel prepared. I feel like I have a lay of the land. You just brought in again this expansion contraction sort of idea with these Plutonian aspects at the end of the month. So there's a lot of this. And I think if we can think of it that way, that there's glimpses into what's possible, then opportunities to crystallize it, bring it into form, and then maybe there's a little bit of disillusionment about what it's going to take, but then there's another expansion, another opportunity to see things in a different way, tap into possibilities, bring it back in.
So one of the things that I like to remind myself of in Pluto transitions, and remember, Pluto stationary, Mercury trining Pluto on the 27th, just after the new moon, the sun trining Pluto on the 24th, just before the new moon. Pluto transits, or planets transiting to Pluto, are not change. They're metamorphosis. And the difference is that change is what happens every year as the leaves fall off the trees and grow back. It's a cycle that we can see. A metamorphosis is a one-way street. In other words, it's the caterpillar morphing into a butterfly. And often when we begin to lose what we are losing, and every metamorphosis requires death, not physical death, but a death of something, because it's the end of a cycle. And when we hit the end of a cycle, the ego, whose job it is to maintain its life, to maintain our being, the ego freaks out and says, hell no, I won't go. And so what happens is that when we're confronted with these great endings, and that's really, what we're experiencing through the 2020s, not just last month and this month and next month, but not only just this year, but through this whole period of time, we're experiencing a grand ending. And there's a part of us everyone is just scared shitless. And so what happens is that we need to remind ourselves that Pluto requires us to let go of what we thought we had. And what we thought we had was control. And we're not in control. The only thing we're in control of is how we process and how we adapt to change. And we have to pick our battles, because we can pick wrong battles and put all of our energy towards fighting something that really isn't the battle. It doesn't matter. And we can be so exhausted that when the real battle comes, we end up losing the war because we've wasted our energy on things that are not important. So it's really important to remember that during this period of time, that if it feels like we're letting go of things that we thought were absolutely important for our survival, like the caterpillar letting go of its caterpillarness, we are. And it's okay, because we're riding a 3-4 billion year life tide, a wave that even though there are pieces that are falling to the wayside and ending, that this transition is so big that I saw a cartoon once of two caterpillars at the base of a milkweed plant with a butterfly going by, and one caterpillar says to the other, "Man, you'd never get me up in one of those contraptions." You know, it's like we fear what we don't know, and yet each and every one of us, and culture and humanity, is going from caterpillar to butterfly, and it scares the hell out of us.
Gosh, it's so good, Rick. We have Stormy Grace in the inner circle right now, and one of the things she
I
has,
love Stormy.
she's so great. And one of the things she has us contemplating is, where am I acting from fear dressed up as courage? So that, when we're feeling like we're courageously fighting something, or we're courageously working to change something, but where is it actually coming from fear and not from a place of empowered love and that sense of when I think of those two caterpillars, and I think of us there at the bottom of the milkweed, it's like, where can we cultivate a sense of adventure and playfulness and openness to what's around that bend, and really invite in a whole new
I
experience.
agree.
And there's an
The
adventure
the
in that.
the etymologist in me, though, would say that it's not fear versus courage. It's fear versus bravado or
Mm,
braveness, which is fake courage.
ah,
Because courage, again, courage comes from the heart. And yet often we fake a sense of false courage.
mm.
Bravado is false courage.
Oh,
And
good.
so I'm not arguing with the concept that Stormy's creating. I think it's
Yes,
really important.
yes,
But again, I think sometimes words are important, and there's a part of me that goes, yeah, I hear what she's saying, but it's really bravado or faking being brave. I'm
right,
tough. I can take this on, when
right,
in your heart you're dying.
right,
That's not courage.
right. So good. Okay, so go check the show notes. Join Rick and Steve and Nick Campion and Alex Trenowith and Penny Thornton virtually in London. You'll have front row tickets for this. Show notes link. Also, one quick other announcement: Georgia Stathis is going to be teaching an aspects course with us. So she's going to be taking her very signature visual, break things down in a way that you can understand course for aspects. And this is a 3-week immersion. She's going to be teaching it live. It's going to be an opportunity to connect with community and learn how to tell the story of the aspects. If you listen to someone like Rick and you go, wow, how does he weave that all together and make it come alive, and look at the chart and actually tell the story of how the planets are engaging with each other and then what that means for our lives? This is going to be a great opportunity for you to get that foundational skill. So
I love Georgia's work. I think she's fantastic. Georgia and I were born 1 month apart, same year.
yes,
And I've known her for forever. I mean, for decades. And I just think her work is fabulous. She's so clear.
yes,
She has a real sense of groundedness and earthiness to how she, even though she's a Pisces,
I know.
she has that sense of like making things real. I hardly endorse, studying with her. She's great.
Amazing. So that is astrologyhub.com/aspects. Class starts on May 13th. We just opened up registration. So if you'd like to join us for that, we'll also put the link in the show notes. But if you're listening, astrologyhub.com/aspects. All right. Rick, I hope that tons of people come and see the event and listen to all of you. It's going to be amazing. Thank you for being here for this May month ahead. We always love having you at Astrology Hub. And
I always love being here. I thank you so much for the work that you do.
All right, everybody. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being curious. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for riding these waves as best as you can. I know that astrologers like Rick and like Steve and like Georgia can be a lifeline that really help us stay stable on these wobbly surfboards as we're riding these waves. So thank you, Rick. Thank you to all the amazing astrologers doing this kind of work and keeping us in tune with what's happening at a bigger perspective. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.